The red warning lights flickered across every screen in the monitoring room. Petrin's 4 eyes widened as he watched the small vessel tumble through space, trailing debris and frozen atmosphere. The young researcher had been tracking routine traffic patterns when this human ship appeared from nowhere, spinning wildly toward the forbidden zone. Sector 9, he whispered, his throat sacs inflating with anxiety. Nobody went to Sector 9. The planet held the most dangerous predator specimens the Council had collected from death worlds across the galaxy. It was a living museum of nightmare creatures, kept isolated for research purposes only. The human ship didn't slow down. It didn't correct course. It just fell. Petrin activated the emergency beacon and watched helplessly as the vessel crashed in Sector 9's northern continent. The impact sent up a plume of dust visible even from orbit. He immediately reported to his supervisor, who reported to the security director, who called an emergency council session within the hour. Council Prime Velen listened to the reports with growing concern. "Survivors?" she asked. "Unknown," Security Director Haltex responded, his scales rippling with agitation. "We're preparing a survey team now. The planet contains over 300 documented predator species," Dr. Nisara added. "If anyone survived the crash, they won't survive long down there." Velen made the decision quickly. "Send a team. Rescue any survivors, but maintain the containment protocols. We cannot risk those creatures escaping." The survey team landed near the crash site 12 hours later. The human vessel had torn a deep scar across the landscape before coming to rest against a cluster of rocks. The hull was split open, exposing the interior to the harsh environment. The team leader, a cautious fellow named Brent, approached slowly with his scanner active. 2 life signs, he reported over the communication link. Both weak. One large, one small. Large, Haltex demanded from orbit. How large? Adult human size. And something smaller, maybe a juvenile. The team moved closer, weapons ready. The planet's native predators were dangerous, but the contained specimens were worse. They'd been collected specifically because they were the deadliest creatures their home worlds produced. If any had been attracted to the crash, this rescue would become very complicated very quickly. Brent reached the torn hull and peered inside. 2 bodies lay motionless among the wreckage. Adult humans, both clearly dead from the impact. But deeper in the ship, he detected movement. The scanner confirmed the life signs were coming from a small sleeping compartment that had somehow remained intact. "I'm going in," Brent announced. He squeezed through the wreckage, his team covering him from outside. The sleeping compartment door was jammed, but not sealed. He pulled it open carefully and froze that a small human child lay unconscious on the floor, blood on his forehead from a head wound. Maybe 8 Earth years old, Brent guessed from his research on humans. The boy was breathing but didn't respond when Brent called out to him. Then Brent saw the other creature. Akati was small, maybe half a meter long, with gray and white fur. It stood between Brent and the child, and every hair on its body was raised. The creature's mouth opened, revealing sharp teeth, and it made a sound unlike anything Brent had ever heard. Part hiss, part growl, pure fury compressed into one continuous noise. "What is that?" Haltex asked through the communication link. Brent checked his scanner. "Accessing Earth Animal Database. Species identified as Malivera capensis. Common name, honey badger. A badger." Haltex sounded confused. "That's not dangerous. It's tiny. It's blocking access to the child," Brent said carefully. The creature hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. It just stared at him with dark eyes that promised violence. "I'm going to try to get past it." That was a mistake. The honey badger moved faster than Brent could track. It launched itself at his leg and bit down hard. Brent screamed and stumbled backward. The creature released him immediately and returned to its position in front of the child, making that terrible sound again. "Fall back," Brent ordered, limping away from the compartment. "Fall back now." The team retreated to a safe distance while Dr. Nisara accessed every file she could find on honey badgers. What she learned made her stomach sink. "They're from Earth," she reported to the Council. "A death world. Class 9 hazard rating. These creatures are famous among Earth's predators. They fight lions. They fight animals 10 times their size. They're immune to most venoms. They have incredibly thick skin that resists bites and stings. And according to Earth records, they never back down from a fight. Never. It's protecting the child, Velen observed, watching the footage from Brent's camera. We need to rescue that boy, Haltex insisted. He'll die down there. Any attempt to approach will result in attack, Dr. Nisara warned. That creature sees us as threats. It will defend the child until it dies, or we do. Velen made another decision. Establish a perimeter. Send supplies via drone. Medical supplies, food, water, shelter materials. Do not approach within 50 meters. We'll observe and reassess. The team followed orders, setting up a monitoring station at a safe distance. They sent drones with supply drops, which the honey badger watched suspiciously but didn't attack. The creature never left the boy's side. 3 days later, the child woke up. The surveillance cameras caught everything. The boy opened his eyes and immediately started crying, calling for his parents. The honey badger pressed against him, making softer sounds now, almost comforting. The boy wrapped his arms around the creature and sobbed into its fur. What's the boy's name? Velen asked Doctor. Nisara checked the ship's recovered records. Billy Chun, 8 Earth years old. Parents were researchers traveling to a new colony. The ship had a mechanical failure. They watched as Billy discovered the supply drops. He opened the containers carefully, finding food, water, medical supplies, and basic tools. The honey badger sniffed everything before allowing Billy to touch it. The boy was smart. He used the medical kit on his head wound, ate sparingly, and began organizing the supplies. He's resourceful, Dr. Nisara noted with approval. That night, a guard named Pollux decided he knew better than the council. He'd been watching the surveillance feeds and convinced himself the danger was exaggerated. It was just a small animal. He could easily grab the boy and run before the creature reacted. He waited until his supervisor was distracted, then approached the crash site quietly. He got within 30 meters before the honey badger detected him. The creature emerged from the shelter Billy had built and stared directly at Pollux's hiding spot. Pollux ran forward, thinking speed would save him. The honey badger met him halfway. The fight lasted less than a minute. Pollux's armor meant nothing. The creature found every gap, every weak point. It climbed him like a ladder, biting and clawing. Pollux screamed and fell, trying to protect his face. The honey badger would have killed him, but Billy came running. "Stop! Brutus, stop!" the boy shouted. The creature paused at the sound of Billy's voice. It backed away from Pollux, returning to the boy's side while keeping eyes on the injured guard. Billy picked up the honey badger and carried it back to the shelter, talking softly to it the whole time. Medical teams extracted Pollux. He survived, but needed extensive treatment. When Velen demanded an explanation for his unauthorized approach, Pollux could only whisper. Its eyes. It wasn't just attacking. It wanted me to know. Stay away from the boy. The boy is his. That night, Council Prime Velen issued the formal decree. It was transmitted to every station, every ship, every council facility. The message was simple and absolute. One rule: never confront the boy, or the monster honey badger who protects him. Nobody argued. They'd all seen the footage. They understood now. This wasn't a pet. This wasn't a simple animal. This was something Earth had created through millions of years of evolution. A creature that knew no fear, felt little pain, and would fight anything that threatened what it loved. And it loved that boy. Dust storms rolled across Sector 9 every morning, and Billy had learned to predict them. He'd wake before dawn, seal the shelter he'd built from ship debris, and wait with Brutus pressed against his side until the red dust settled. 3 weeks had passed since the crash. 3 weeks since his parents died. 3 weeks of surviving on an alien planet with only a honey badger for company. The surveillance station watched everything. Dr. Nisara had become obsessed with the footage, studying every interaction between boy and animal. What she saw defied her understanding of Earth creatures. Brutus wasn't just protecting Billy. He was caring for him in ways that suggested genuine intelligence. "Look at this," she told Velen during their daily briefing. The screen showed Brutus dragging a container of water toward Billy while the boy slept. He understands the boy needs water regularly. He brings it without being asked. It's learned behavior, Haltek suggested, though he sounded uncertain. Watch this part. Nisara jumped to another clip. Brutus was collecting small purple flowers from near the perimeter and bringing them to Billy. Those flowers are safe. Non toxic. How does he know? We've documented 3 poisonous plant species within his patrol range. He's never brought those to Billy. Never. Velen leaned closer to the screen. Perhaps honey badgers have natural detection abilities? Their earth biology suggests resistance to toxins, not detection, Nisara replied. This one is testing things. Learning what's safe. Making decisions. Security Director Haltex wasn't convinced the situation required such caution. He'd authorized 5 separate rescue attempts over the past weeks, each ending the same way. Stun weapons failed. Tranquilizers were shrugged off like water. Even sound cannons only made Brutus more aggressive. The creature had injured 14 personnel so far, and Haltex's reputation was suffering. We need a new approach, he announced during a strategy meeting. Overwhelming force. Containment fields. Grab the boy before the animal can react. Absolutely not, Dr. Nisara objected. Every failed attempt makes Brutus more defensive. We're teaching him that all aliens are threats. Then what do you suggest? We leave a child alone on a death world forever. We establish trust, Nisara said firmly. We send supplies. We communicate remotely. We give Billy reasons to believe we want to help without threatening his guardian. Velen approved the new strategy, overruling Haltex's protests. They began sending more varied supplies. Books on data tablets, educational materials, entertainment programs, food that resembled Earth cuisine based on recovered ship records. Billy's response surprised them all. He started talking to the surveillance cameras. Thank you for the food, he said one morning, looking directly at a drone hovering nearby. Brutus liked the dried meat. I like the fruit. Do you have any chocolate? The monitoring team scrambled to respond. They sent chocolate in the next supply drop. Billy's face lit up when he found it, and for the first time since the crash, they saw him really smile. He broke off a piece for Brutus, who sniffed it suspiciously before eating it. Then Billy looked at the camera again. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. I miss my parents, but I know you're trying to help. Brutus knows too. He's just making sure you don't hurt me. Dr. Nisara felt something twist in her chest. This child was alone, traumatized, surrounded by dangers he barely understood, and he was trying to comfort them, trying to explain his protector's behavior, trying to bridge the gap, but not everyone appreciated the delicate progress being made. A trade ship arrived at the orbital station carrying new personnel, and among them was someone who hadn't received proper briefings about Sector 9. A cargo handler named Wex heard stories about a human child and a small Earth animal causing trouble for the entire council. He thought it was ridiculous. I'll get the boy myself, he boasted to his crew. Show these council types how it's done. He took a supply shuttle down to Sector 9 without authorization, landed near Billy's compound, and walked straight past the warning markers. Billy was working in his small garden, coaxing vegetables from ship hydroponics equipment he'd salvaged. Brutus was patrolling the perimeter as usual. Wex didn't see the honey badger until it was too late. One moment, he was approaching Billy with his hands raised peacefully. The next moment, something hit him from the side like a missile. Brutus drove him to the ground and went for his throat. Only Wex's heavy collar saved his life. He rolled, tried to run, and Brutus chased him. Billy came running. Brutus! No! Come back! The honey badger stopped, turned, and trotted back to Billy. The boy scooped him up and held him close while Wex scrambled back to his shuttle, bleeding from a dozen wounds. The incident was reported to the council within the hour, and this time Velen's patience ran out. Enough, she declared. This rule is now law. Anyone who approaches the boy without authorization faces permanent detention. Anyone who harms the creature faces worse. Is that clear? Everyone agreed. The rule became absolute. Meanwhile, something else was happening on Sector 9. Billy had started teaching himself the alien languages from the educational materials provided. Within days, he was constructing simple sentences. Within a week, he was reading basic texts. The monitoring team was astounded. Human children learn languages faster than our young, Dr. Nassara explained to Velen. Their brains are incredibly adaptable. Billy is using that ability to survive. One morning, Billy spoke directly to the cameras in nearly fluent council standard. My name is Billy. I am 8 years old. This is Brutus. He's a honey badger from Earth. He was my family's pet, but now he's my friend. He protects me because he loves me. I protect him because I love him too. Please don't try to take him away. Please don't hurt him. He's all I have left. The entire council watched that recording. Even Haltex fell silent. Then something happened that changed everything. A native predator, something the research teams had classified as a ridge stalker, detected Billy's compound. It was massive, six-legged, with armored plates and teeth like knives. It approached at dusk when the light was poor. Brutus sensed it first. He made a sound Billy had never heard before, a deep, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground. The boy grabbed his emergency beacon and pressed the alert button, but he knew rescue would take too long. The predator was already circling the compound. The IT attacked from the east, moving faster than something that large should move. Brutus met it head-on. The surveillance footage was almost too brutal to watch. The ridge stalker outweighed Brutus by at least 50 kilograms. It had natural weapons that could tear through metal. But Brutus fought like something possessed. He went for the eyes first, climbing the creature's face while it roared and shook. When it threw him off, he rolled and came back immediately. No hesitation, no fear, just pure determination. Billy screamed for help, but there was nothing anyone could do. The battle lasted 5 terrible minutes. Brutus took horrible wounds, deep gashes across his back, a broken rib, blood matting his fur. But he never stopped, never retreated. When the ridge stalker finally fled, limping and half-blind, Brutus tried to chase it. No. Billy ran to him, wrapping his arms around the honey badger. Stop, you won. You won. Brutus collapsed in the boy's arms. Billy carried him into the shelter, sobbing, applying every medical supply he had. The monitoring team watched helplessly as an 8-year-old child tried to save his protector's life. Send medical supplies, Velen ordered. Everything we have. Veterinary equipment designed for tough-skinned species. Pain medication. Surgical tools. Send it all. The supplies arrived within the hour. Billy worked through the night, following instructions from Dr. Nassara, transmitted through his tablet. He cleaned wounds, administered medication, bandaged injuries. His hands shook the entire time. Please don't die, he whispered to Brutus. Please. I need you. Brutus survived. His healing ability was remarkable, another trait of his species. Within days, he was walking again, though stiffly. Within 2 weeks, he was patrolling the perimeter, though his movements were slower. The scars would never fully fade, but something had changed. The council had watched a small creature fight, something 3 times its size, to protect a child. They'd watched that child spend days nursing his defender back to health. They'd seen pure love in action, crossing species barriers, defying logic. We cannot separate them, Dr. Nassara stated formally. Any attempt would be cruel beyond measure. Velen agreed completely. She issued a new order. The boy stays with his protector. We support them both. We earn their trust slowly, and we remember what we witnessed. That creature would have died for that child. That child would have died trying to save him. This is what humans call family. The rule was now understood not just as a warning, but as respect. Never confront the boy or the monster honey badger who protected him, because what they shared was sacred. 6 months had passed since Billy learned to speak the council's language, and his small compound had transformed from a survival shelter into something resembling a home. He'd organized the space with surprising efficiency for someone so young. A sleeping area with actual bedding from supply drops. A study corner where he kept his growing collection of data tablets. A garden that produced fresh vegetables. And always, Brutus patrolling the perimeter like a furry sentinel with attitude. The surveillance team had grown fond of their daily observations. Billy would wave at the cameras each morning and share stories about his day. He talked about missing Earth, about memories of his parents, about the books he was reading. He told them facts about honey badgers he remembered from nature documentaries his father used to watch. Did you know Brutus's species can hunt venomous snakes? Billy explained to a camera one afternoon while the honey badger napped in a sunny spot. They're immune to lots of toxins, and they can dig really fast. Brutus dug a whole storage room under our shelter last week. Dr. Nassara had compiled extensive reports on their progress. Billy was thriving academically, absorbing information at a remarkable rate. Brutus was healing well from his fight with the ridge stalker, though he remained permanently vigilant. The arrangement was working. Everyone understood the rule. Everyone followed it. Then Commander Drex arrived. That he came from a military background where problems had simple solutions. His assignment to the orbital station was meant to strengthen security, but he viewed the situation on Sector 9 as evidence of weakness. During his first briefing, he listened to the reports about Billy and Brutus with growing disbelief. "Let me understand this correctly," Drex said slowly. "Our entire operation has been held hostage by a child and a small animal for half a year." "That's an oversimplification," Dr. Nassara replied carefully. "The situation requires delicate handling. What requires is proper military action," Drex countered. "We extract the boy. We contain the creature. We restore normal operations." Velen fixed him with a stern look. "Commander, you will familiarize yourself with all previous reports before making any decisions. 14 personnel have been injured attempting exactly what you suggest. With respect, Council Prime, those attempts were poorly planned. I have experience with dangerous creatures. This honey badger is what, 10 kilograms? My team handles threats far larger. Size is irrelevant with this species," Dr. Nassara warned. "They're from Earth, a death world. They've evolved to fight creatures that should easily kill them. Pain barely slows them down. Fear doesn't exist in their psychology." Drex dismissed her concerns with a wave. "I've read the reports. I remain unconvinced. Give me 2 days to prepare, and I'll have that boy safely aboard this station." Velen should have relieved him of duty immediately. Later, she would regret her hesitation. But Drex had powerful supporters in the military council, and she hoped he might prove more reasonable after reviewing the evidence. She was wrong. Drex spent those 2 days planning his operation with 20 soldiers. They studied the compound layout, Brutus's patrol patterns, Billy's daily schedule. They equipped themselves with heavy containment gear, energy shields, and nets designed for capturing dangerous fauna. Drex was convinced they had every advantage. "We move at dawn," he briefed his team. "The animal will be sluggish from the cold night. We'll have the boy secured before it can react." What Drex didn't understand was that Brutus never became sluggish. Ever. His species was famous for their relentless energy and constant alertness. Sleep was something they did in short bursts, always ready to wake at the slightest disturbance. When 20 armed soldiers began approaching the compound before sunrise, Brutus detected them immediately. Billy woke to Brutus's warning growl. He looked outside and saw figures moving in the dim light. "No," he whispered. "Not again." He activated his emergency beacon and spoke urgently into his communication tablet. "Dr. Nassara, they're coming. Please tell them to stop." But Drex had disabled the communication alerts, not wanting interference. His team continued advancing. Brutus positioned himself directly between the approaching soldiers and the shelter. He made that sound, that terrible continuous growl that promised violence. His body was tensed, ready to explode into action. Several soldiers hesitated, remembering reports they'd read. "It's just an animal," Drex insisted. "Maintain formation. Activate shields." They raised energy barriers that could stop projectiles and redirect energy weapons. They were designed for battlefield conditions. They should have been impenetrable to a small creature. Drex gave the order to advance. Brutus launched himself at the near soldier so fast that the helmet camera barely caught the movement. He went low, under the shield, and attacked the legs where armor joints were vulnerable. The soldier screamed and fell. Brutus was already moving to the next target. The formations broke almost immediately. Nobody had trained for something this fast and this low to the ground. Brutus moved like liquid violence, finding every weakness in their equipment. He climbed soldiers like trees, went for their faces, their throats, their hands. When they tried to grab him, his thick skin and incredible flexibility made him nearly impossible to hold. Energy weapons discharged wildly. Soldiers shouted contradictory orders. 3 men tried to surround Brutus, and he took them all down within seconds. He was everywhere at once, a gray and white blur of fury and teeth and claws. And through it all, he positioned himself so that no stray shot could hit Billy's shelter. "Fall back," someone screamed. "Hold position." Drex countermanded, but his voice had lost its confidence. Brutus bit through someone's glove, and the soldier dropped his weapon. He clawed across another soldier's visor, cracking the supposedly unbreakable material. He drove them back meter by meter, never giving ground, never showing pain, even when he took hits that should have stunned him. Billy came running out of the shelter, tears streaming down his face. "Stop. Please stop. You're going to kill each other." Brutus heard Billy's voice and paused for just a moment, looking back at the boy. That moment of distraction let a soldier get close. He swung a capture pole at the honey badger. Brutus dodged, but the pole clipped his shoulder. He stumbled. Something changed in Billy's expression. He ran toward the soldier who'd struck Brutus, and his voice carried a fury that shocked everyone. "Don't you dare hurt him." The soldier froze, confused by a child's rage. That was when Brutus recovered and hit him with everything he had. The soldier's armor held, but he went down hard. 12 minutes after it started, the operation ended. 14 soldiers were injured to varying degrees. None were killed because Brutus had once again held back just enough. But the message was clear. They could send 20 soldiers or 200. The result would be the same. Drex himself had stayed back during the fight, and that probably saved his life. He watched the footage afterward in stunned silence. He'd seen combat on 6 worlds. He'd faced creatures that gave him nightmares. But he'd never seen anything like what that honey badger had done to his team. "How?" he asked Dr. Nassara. "How was that possible?" "I told you," she replied without sympathy. "Earth is a death world. Humanity evolved alongside creatures like that. They learned to respect them. We should do the same." Council Prime Velen was absolutely furious. She ordered Drex confined to quarters, pending disciplinary hearings. Then she recorded a personal message to Billy. "I am deeply sorry," she said, and she meant every word. "What happened was unauthorized and will never happen again. The commander responsible has been removed. The rule stands. Nobody will approach you or Brutus without permission." Billy watched her message while holding Brutus, who was licking his wounds. The boy's face was streaked with tears and dirt. He looked exhausted. "I believe you," he said quietly to the camera. "But Brutus doesn't anymore. You scared him. You scared me. How do we trust you after this?" That question haunted Velen for days. She'd allowed this disaster through her hesitation. Now a child and his protector had even more reason to see all aliens as threats. The careful progress they'd made was destroyed. She issued a new decree, this one carrying the full weight of council law. The rule was no longer just a guideline. It was absolute legal mandate. Anyone who approached Billy without explicit authorization would face permanent imprisonment. Anyone who harmed Brutus would face execution. The penalties were harsh, but after watching that battle footage, nobody questioned them. Down on Sector 9, Billy sat with Brutus and watched the sunset. The honey badger was battered, but unbroken. New scars joined the old ones from the Ridge Stalker fight. Billy gently applied medicine to the wounds, talking softly. "I won't let them hurt you," the boy promised. "And you won't let them hurt me. We're a team. Always." Brutus made a soft, chittering sound and pressed his head against Billy's chest. Up in orbit, the council watched and finally understood. This wasn't a boy with a pet. This was family. And families protected each other no matter the cost. 1 year after the crash, Billy celebrated his 9th birthday alone. Well, not completely alone. Brutus sat beside him while he sang a quiet birthday song his mother used to sing. The monitoring team sent a special supply drop with cake mix and candles, which made Billy smile even as tears ran down his face. He shared the cake with Brutus, who ate his portion with suspicious sniffs but seemed to enjoy it. Life had settled into a routine that worked. Billy spent his mornings studying from the extensive educational library the council provided. He was learning mathematics, sciences, history of the galactic civilizations, and 3 different alien languages. His afternoons were for maintaining the compound, tending his garden, and playing with Brutus. The honey badger had his own routines, patrolling boundaries that only he seemed to understand, investigating interesting smells, and occasionally bringing Billy strange gifts like colorful rocks or oddly shaped sticks. The relationship between Billy and the council had improved significantly after the Drex incident. Dr. Nassara spoke with Billy daily through video communications. She'd become something like a teacher and friend, answering his endless questions about alien biology, explaining cultural differences, sharing stories from her own childhood. Billy taught her about Earth in return, describing oceans and forests and animals she'd never seen except in databases. "I miss rain," Billy said during one conversation. "It doesn't rain here, just dust storms." "What does rain feel like?" Dr. Nassara asked curiously. Billy thought about it. "Like tiny cold kisses on your skin, and it smells clean. And afterward, everything is green and fresh." These conversations were precious to both of them. For Billy, Dr. Nassara represented connection to intelligent life beyond his small world. For Nassara, Billy represented something she'd never experienced before: genuine friendship with a human child. She found herself looking forward to their talks, worrying about his well-being, celebrating his achievements. Then the asteroid tracking system triggered an emergency alert. The duty officer saw it first. A massive object moving through space on a trajectory that intersected with Sector 9. Not a natural asteroid, based on its composition readings. Some kind of ancient debris, probably from a long-dead civilization. But its origin didn't matter. What mattered was its destination and the calculations that followed. "Impact in 72 hours, the officer reported. Sector 9, Northern Continent." Council Prime Velen pulled up the impact projection and felt her blood run cold. The blast radius would encompass everything within 200 kilometers of the strike point. Billy's compound was 47 kilometers from projected impact. "Can we deflect it?" she demanded. "Too large, too close," the science officer replied. "We need weapons we don't have and time we don't have." "Then we evacuate," Velen decided. "Prepare a shuttle. I'll contact Billy personally." That conversation was one of the hardest things Velen had ever done. She explained the danger using simple terms, showing Billy the calculations, the projections, the timeline. She watched his face go pale as he understood. "You need to leave," Velen said gently. "We'll send a ship. You can bring everything you want. Your supplies, your equipment, Brutus. Everything. But Brutus won't get on a ship with strangers," Billy said immediately. "He doesn't trust anyone except me. Then we'll find another way. Perhaps if you board first, he'll follow." Billy shook his head. "You don't understand. He thinks ships are dangerous. They kill my parents. He won't go near one." Dr. Nassara joined the conversation. "Billy, we have 3 days. We'll figure something out. But you must survive this. Please." Billy promised to try. He spent hours attempting to explain the danger to Brutus. He pointed at the sky, used his tablet to show pictures of impacts and explosions. Brutus watched with interest, but clearly didn't comprehend. Why would he? Asteroids weren't predators. They didn't smell like threats. To Brutus, the sky was just the sky. 2 days before impact, Velen sent a shuttle to land 5 kilometers from Billy's compound, as close as they dared without triggering Brutus's defensive instincts. They left the ramp down and the engines running on standby. Billy could see it from his shelter. "I have an idea," he told Dr. Nassara, "but I don't know if it'll work." "What idea?" "I'll walk to the ship. Brutus will follow me because he always follows me. Then I'll get on board and he'll have to choose. Come with me or stay behind." It was a terrible plan with a dozen ways to fail. But nobody had a better one. Billy started walking at dawn. He wore a backpack with supplies and carried his favorite data tablet. Brutus noticed immediately that something was different. The boy wasn't just taking a short walk around the compound. He was leaving. The honey badger made worried sounds and ran circles around Billy's legs. The boy knelt down and hugged him. "I need you to trust me," Billy whispered. "Something bad is coming. We have to go with them. Please, Brutus. Please trust me." Then Billy stood and kept walking. Brutus followed, as Billy knew he would. But the honey badger was agitated, constantly looking back at the compound, looking around for threats, trying to understand what was happening. The walk took 3 hours. Billy talked the entire time, explaining and reassuring and pleading. Brutus stayed close, but grew more anxious with each step. When the shuttle came into view, he stopped and growled. "I know," Billy said. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we have to do this." Billy walked to the shuttle ramp. Brutus followed to the bottom, but refused to go further. He stood at the base of the ramp, staring up at Billy, making distressed, chittering sounds. "Come on," Billy encouraged. "It's okay. See? I am okay." Brutus wouldn't move. The boy climbed halfway up the ramp and sat down, patting the metal beside him. Brutus paced at the bottom, clearly torn between his instinct to protect Billy and his fear of the shuttle. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Billy's voice grew hoarse from talking. Brutus remained at the bottom of the ramp, refusing to board but also refusing to leave. They were stuck. 12 hours to impact. The shuttle pilot reported nervously to Velen. "Give them time," Velen ordered. Though her own anxiety was rising, Billy tried everything. He pretended to sleep on the ramp, thinking Brutus would come guard him. The honey badger stayed at the bottom, watchful but immobile. Billy tried going back down, then running up the ramp quickly. Brutus followed to the bottom and stopped again. Nothing worked. Finally, with 8 hours remaining, Billy made a decision. He lay down at the very top of the ramp, curled up, and closed his eyes. Not pretending this time. He was genuinely exhausted. He'd given everything he had to convince Brutus. If it didn't work, they'd die together. "What's he doing?" Velen asked, watching the surveillance feed. "Giving up," Dr. Nasaris said quietly. "Or maybe showing Brutus that he trusts him to make the right choice." They watched as Billy's breathing slowed into actual sleep. The stress and fear and hours of talking had drained him completely. And Brutus, standing at the bottom of the ramp, watched his sleeping human with growing distress. The honey badger paced. He made soft, worried sounds. He looked back at the compound one last time. Then he looked up at Billy, alone and vulnerable at the top of the ramp. And something in that small, fierce brain made a calculation. His boy needed protection. His boy was up there. Therefore, that's where he needed to be. Brutus climbed the ramp slowly, alert for any threat. He reached Billy and sniffed him carefully. The boy didn't wake. Brutus circled him once, then lay down pressed against Billy's chest, positioning himself between the boy and the shuttle's interior. Anyone trying to reach Billy would have to go through him first. "Now," Velen ordered. The shuttle's ramp retracted smoothly. The door sealed. Billy stirred slightly, but didn't wake fully. Brutus tensed at the movement, but stayed calm because Billy was calm. The shuttle lifted off gently. Through the window, the compound shrank into the distance. An hour later, they were in orbit. 2 hours after that, from the safety of space, they watched the asteroid strike Sector 9 surface. The impact was visible even from orbit, a flash of light followed by expanding shock waves. Everything within the blast radius simply ceased to exist. Billy woke as the impact happened. He looked out the window and saw his home destroyed. The shelter he'd built, the garden he'd grown, the place where he'd survived and learned and lived with Brutus for a year. All gone, but he didn't cry. He was beyond tears. He just pressed his face against the window and watched. Brutus pressed against him, sensing his distress, offering the only comfort he could provide. His presence. "I'm sorry," Dr. Nassareth said over the communication system. "I'm so sorry, Billy." "We're alive," Billy whispered. "That's what matters. Brutus and me, we're still together." The shuttle docked with the main station. The crew had been thoroughly briefed. Nobody attempted to approach. They simply opened the docking bay and let Billy walk out on his own terms with Brutus beside him. Velen had prepared a large habitat for them, sealed but comfortable. Big enough to feel like space rather than a cage, supplied with everything Billy might need. She watched through cameras as the boy entered with his protector and looked around. "It's not home," Billy said to the camera. "But maybe it can be." Brutus sniffed every corner, investigating every surface. Then he found a sunny spot near a window and settled down to watch. His job hadn't changed. Protect the boy, no matter where they were. The habitat became Billy's world for the next 3 months. It was larger than his compound on Sector 9 had been, with actual walls instead of salvaged ship debris, climate control that kept everything comfortable, and windows that showed the stars beyond. But it was still a cage, no matter how comfortable. Billy understood that even if nobody said it out loud, he fell into depression during those first weeks. He barely touched the food provided, spent hours staring out the windows, stopped engaging with his educational programs. Dr. Nasura visited daily, speaking to him through the habitat's communication system, but Billy's responses were brief and hollow. Brutus noticed everything. The honey badger stayed closer than usual, pressing against Billy when he cried, bringing him bits of food as if trying to coax him to eat. Sometimes Billy would wake from nightmares to find Brutus sitting on his chest, staring at his face with those dark, intelligent eyes, checking that he was okay, keeping watch over his spirit as much as his body. The station's inhabitants were fascinated by their unusual residence. Children would press their faces against the habitat's viewing windows, hoping to see the legendary monster honey badger. Adults would pause during their daily routines to check on the boy who'd survived a death world. Everyone knew the rule, but everyone also felt drawn to this strange pair who represented something pure. Survival, loyalty, love that crossed species boundaries. One morning, a young alien girl named Pippa wandered to the habitat windows. She was about Billy's age equivalent, with blue-scaled skin and large, curious eyes. She heard all the stories about the human boy and wanted to see him for herself. Billy was sitting near the window reading when he noticed her staring. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Pippa waved tentatively. Billy, surprised, waved back. She smiled, and something in Billy's chest loosened slightly. He pointed at his data tablet, then at himself, making a questioning gesture. Pippa understood. She tapped on her own learning device and held it up to show him. They were studying the same mathematics program. Billy managed a small smile. He wrote something on his tablet in large letters and pressed it against the window. "My name is Billy." Pippa wrote back. "I am Pippa. Do you like mathematics?" Billy made a face and shook his head, which made Pippa laugh. That sound, that genuine laughter, was the first truly good thing Billy had experienced since the asteroid. He found himself laughing too. Brutus watched this interaction carefully. A stranger was close to Billy, but there was a barrier between them. And Billy seemed happy, not threatened. The honey badger remained alert, but didn't attack the window or make threatening sounds. Pippa came back the next day, and the day after that. Soon she was bringing friends. They'd gather outside the habitat and communicate with Billy through the windows, writing messages, showing pictures, sharing their own stories. Billy started participating in their lessons remotely, working on the same assignments, competing to solve problems faster. Dr. Nasara watched this development with hope. "He's socializing," she reported to Velen. "It's limited by the barrier, but it's something." "What about education?" Velen asked. "Can we provide proper schooling?" That question led to an innovative solution. The station's educators designed a special classroom with a reinforced transparent wall dividing it. Billy and Brutus would attend class on one side. The other students would be on the opposite side. Lessons could be conducted normally, discussions could happen, but the rule would remain enforced. Billy was hesitant when they proposed the idea. "What if Brutus gets upset?" he asked Dr. Nasara during their daily conversation. "What if he thinks the other kids are threats?" "We'll go slowly," Nasara promised. "One student at first, then gradually more. If Brutus shows distress, we stop immediately. You control the pace." They started with just Pippa. She sat on one side of the divided classroom, while Billy sat on the other with Brutus beside him. A teacher conducted a simple lesson about planetary geology. Brutus watched Pippa constantly, but remained calm. By the end of the hour-long session, he'd relaxed enough to lie down, though his eyes never left the other side of the room. Over the following weeks, more students were gradually added. 2, then 4, then 8. Billy thrived on the interaction. He'd been so isolated for so long that having peers, even across a barrier, filled a need he'd barely acknowledged. He laughed at their jokes, competed in academic challenges, and slowly became part of a community. Brutus adjusted remarkably well. He learned to recognize the regular students, becoming less tense around familiar faces. He still positioned himself between Billy and the barrier, still watched everyone with suspicion, but he no longer treated every interaction as a potential threat. Then came the incident that tested everything they'd built. That a maintenance worker named Fricks was new to the station and had received inadequate orientation. He'd heard about the rule, but didn't truly understand its importance. He needed to repair a ventilation unit inside Billy's habitat and figured the boy would simply control his pet while Fricks worked. He entered the habitat through the maintenance access without announcement. Billy was studying at the time, Brutus napping nearby. The honey badger woke instantly at the sound of the door opening. He saw a stranger inside the habitat, inside his territory, near his boy. Brutus attacked without warning. Fricks barely had time to raise his arms before the honey badger was on him, biting and clawing. The worker screamed and stumbled backward, trying to reach the door. "Stop!" Billy shouted. "Brutus, stop!" The honey badger paused. He'd never heard that tone from Billy before. Pure command. Absolute authority. Brutus looked back at his boy, confused, still in fighting mode, but uncertain. "Come here," Billy said firmly. "Now!" Brutus released Fricks and trotted back to Billy. The worker fled through the maintenance door, bleeding from several wounds, but alive. Billy held Brutus close, feeling the honey badger trembling with adrenaline. Security arrived within minutes. Medical teams treated Fricks, and an investigation began. Dr. Nisara rushed to check on Billy, finding him sitting against the wall with Brutus in his lap. "Are you hurt?" she asked urgently through the communication system. "I'm fine," Billy said quietly. "But Fricks could have died. Brutus would have killed him if I hadn't stopped him." "This wasn't your fault," Nisara said firmly. "Fricks violated protocol. He entered without authorization." "But Brutus listened to me," Billy said, looking down at the honey badger. "He was attacking and I told him to stop, and he did. That's never happened before." This realization changed everything. Until now, everyone had assumed Brutus was purely instinct-driven, too focused on protection to listen even to Billy during an active threat. But the footage proved otherwise. When Billy commanded him with absolute authority, Brutus obeyed immediately. Velen reviewed the incident thoroughly. She reprimanded the maintenance supervisor who'd sent Fricks in without proper briefing. She reviewed training procedures for all new staff. And she had a long conversation with Dr. Nisara about what this meant for the future. "Billy has influence over Brutus," Nisara explained. "Real influence. The honey badger trusts his judgment now. If Billy says someone is safe, Brutus might accept that." "Might," Velen emphasized. "That's still uncertain. But it's hope. More hope than we've had before." They approached Billy with a proposal. Would he be willing to try introducing someone to Brutus directly? Not a stranger, but someone Billy already trusted through their window conversations. Someone patient and calm. Dr. Nisara volunteered to be the first. Billy was terrified. "What if it goes wrong? What if Brutus hurts you?" "Then we stop immediately," Nisara said. "But Billy, you've been living behind barriers for so long. Don't you want to touch another person? Shake a hand? Get a hug?" Billy's eyes filled with tears. He wanted that more than he could express. But the thought of risking Nisara, the closest thing he had to a friend besides Brutus, made him hesitate. They started extremely slowly. Nisara sat outside the habitat for days, just sitting, visible through the window. She brought food and passed it through a small slot designed for supply delivery. She talked to both Billy and Brutus, her voice calm and steady. Brutus watched her constantly, but began to recognize her as the voice from the communication system. The familiar voice. The friend voice. After a week, Nisara entered the habitat. She stayed near the door, 5 meters from Billy and Brutus. The honey badger tensed but didn't attack. Billy spoke to him constantly. "It's okay. She's safe. She's our friend." Every day, Nisara came closer. 4 meters. 3 meters. 2 meters. She moved at Brutus's pace, reading his body language, backing off when he seemed stressed. Billy guided everything, interpreting Brutus's moods, knowing when to push and when to wait. Finally, after 3 weeks of gradual introduction, Nisara sat just 1 meter from Billy. Brutus lay between them, watching her with intensity but no aggression. She and Billy talked about normal things. Her childhood, his memories of Earth, mathematics they both found boring. And slowly, carefully, Nisara extended her hand. Billy looked at Brutus. "Is it okay?" he asked the honey badger. Brutus sniffed toward Nisara's hand, processing her scent, evaluating the threat. Then he looked at Billy and made a soft chittering sound. Not aggressive, just acknowledging. Billy reached out and took Nisara's hand. The first physical contact with another intelligent being since his parents died. Brutus sniffed their joined hands carefully, then settled his head back down. Allowing it, Billy started crying. Nisara squeezed his hand gently, tears in her own eyes. Across the station, Velen watched the feed and felt something profound. This was more than just progress. This was proof that the rule, the fear, the isolation might someday end. Not through force or containment, but through patience and trust, and love. 2 years had passed since the rescue from Sector 9, and Billy had just turned 11 years old. The habitat had expanded twice to give him more space, and his circle of trusted visitors had grown to include Dr. Nisara, Pippa, and her family, and 3 teachers who'd earned Brutus's grudging acceptance through months of patient introduction. But despite this progress, Billy still lived behind barriers. The rule remained absolute for everyone else on the station. Then the human diplomatic ship arrived. The vessel appeared in council space, broadcasting identification codes and a clear message. They were searching for crash survivors. They had confirmation that Billy's family had been in the accident. They were here to bring him home. Velen received the human delegation in formal chambers. They were professional and courteous, but their mission was clear. Billy was a human child. He belonged with humans. They'd come to retrieve him and return him to Earth space where relatives were waiting. Billy has thrived under our care, Velen explained. He's healthy, educated, and has formed meaningful relationships here. The lead diplomat, a stern woman named Ambassador Walsh, shook her head. With respect, Council Prime, he's a child living in what amounts to quarantine. His remaining family wants him home. We have legal authority to take custody. You should speak with Billy first, Velen suggested. Let him express his own wishes. They arranged a meeting through the habitat's communication system. Billy appeared on screen with Brutus beside him, and the human delegation saw him clearly for the first time. He looked healthy but older than his years. His eyes held experiences no 11-year-old should have. Billy, Ambassador Walsh said gently, we're here to take you home, to Earth. You have an aunt and uncle who want to meet you. You'll have a normal life. Friends, school, everything you've missed. Billy was quiet for a long moment. What about Brutus? We'll make arrangements for him. Perhaps a wildlife sanctuary or specialized care facility. No, Billy said immediately. He stays with me. Billy, honey badgers require specific environments. They're wild animals. We can't just bring one to Earth and expect him to adapt to urban life. He's not a wild animal, Billy said, his voice hardening. He's my family. He protected me every single day. He fought things that should have killed him to keep me safe. You don't get to separate us. The delegation exchanged glances. They'd reviewed the reports, seen the footage, but clearly hadn't understood the depth of the bond. Ambassador Walsh tried a different approach. We'll find the best possible care for him. Places with land and proper environment. You can visit whenever you want. You're not listening, Billy said. Brutus goes where I go. That's not negotiable. The conversation ended badly, with both sides frustrated. The delegation threatened legal action. They'd seek formal custody through human courts. Billy was a minor. His relatives had rights. The council couldn't simply keep a human child. Velen convened an emergency session. The legal situation was complicated. By most interpretations, the humans had valid claims. But removing Billy by force would require entering the habitat, taking him from Brutus, and that would end in violence. They'd learned that lesson too many times. The doctor Nisara suggested a demonstration. Let them meet Brutus directly. Let them understand what they're proposing to separate. Against her better judgment, Velen agreed. 3 members of the human delegation were invited to enter the habitat with proper preparation. They were briefed extensively. They watched footage of previous incidents. They were warned repeatedly. But they remained convinced this was exaggerated, that a small animal couldn't possibly be the threat described. Ambassador Walsh led the group, accompanied by a security officer and a wildlife specialist. They entered the habitat carrying containment equipment, confident they could handle one honey badger. Billy had begged them not to do this, but they insisted. Brutus detected the strangers immediately. These weren't his approved visitors. They carried unfamiliar equipment. They moved with purpose toward Billy. Every instinct he possessed screamed danger. He attacked the security officer first, the obvious threat. The officer had body armor and training. He lasted approximately 8 seconds before Brutus bypassed his defenses and took him down. The wildlife specialist tried to deploy a capture net. Brutus shredded it and drove her back against the wall. Ambassador Walsh stood frozen, finally understanding the reports hadn't exaggerated anything. Brutus, Billy shouted. Stop. Now. The honey badger paused mid-attack, looking back at Billy. The boy ran forward and picked Brutus up, holding him close. The honey badger was trembling with adrenaline, but allowed Billy to restrain him. Get out, Billy said to the delegation, his voice shaking. Just get out. They fled. The security officer needed medical treatment for multiple lacerations. The wildlife specialist had minor injuries. Ambassador Walsh was unharmed physically but visibly shaken. She'd seen death in those dark eyes. She'd understood that only Billy's intervention had saved them. The delegation withdrew to their ship. They filed formal complaints. They demanded the honey badger be destroyed as a dangerous animal. They threatened sanctions against the council. But underneath all the official outrage, they'd lost confidence in their mission. How could they separate a child from his protector when that separation would require violence? Council Prime Velen made her decision. She called a formal hearing with the human delegation present. Billy was allowed to attend via communication link, Brutus beside him as always. This council has reviewed all evidence, Velen announced. We've examined the legal claims, the ethical considerations, and the practical realities. We declare Billy under council protection with the following conditions. First, Brutus is recognized as his legal guardian. They are bonded family and will not be separated. Second, Billy may choose to return to human space when he reaches maturity, but that choice is his alone. Third, human relatives may visit under supervised conditions, but custody claims are denied. Ambassador Walsh stood immediately. You can't legally make that determination. He's human. Human law applies. He's currently in council space under council protection, Velen countered. And the practical reality is simple. Any attempt to forcibly remove him will result in casualties. That honey badger has proven repeatedly that he will fight to the death to protect Billy. We will not authorize violence against a child or his guardian. The ruling stood. The human delegation protested formally, but had no practical recourse. They couldn't extract Billy without starting a war over one child. Eventually, they departed, promising this wasn't over, but accepting the temporary defeat. Billy watched them leave and felt complicated emotions. Part of him wanted to go home, see Earth again, live a normal life. But a larger part knew that Brutus wouldn't survive in human space. The honey badger would be locked in a cage somewhere, separated from Billy, probably drugged to control his protective instincts. That wasn't life. That was prison. I made the right choice, Billy said to Dr. Nisara during their next conversation. Didn't I? You chose loyalty, Nisara replied gently. You chose to honor the bond you share. That's never wrong. Life on the station continued. Billy's education progressed rapidly. He started learning advanced sciences, showing particular interest in xenobiology. He wanted to understand all the different species that lived in the galaxy, how they thought, how they bonded. He wanted to bridge the gaps between worlds. Brutus began showing his age. The honey badger was now 7 years old, which was ancient for his species. His muzzle had gone completely gray. He moved more slowly, though he never stopped patrolling the habitat's boundaries. His eyesight dimmed slightly. His hearing wasn't as sharp, but his devotion to Billy never wavered. Billy noticed every change and adjusted accordingly. He made sure Brutus's food was easier to chew. He provided softer bedding. He spent extra time grooming the honey badger, checking for any health issues. The roles had reversed subtly. Billy was now the primary caretaker, protecting his protector. When Brutus developed arthritis in his hips, Billy worked with station veterinarians to manage the pain. This required allowing medical personnel into the habitat regularly, which would have been impossible years earlier. But Brutus had learned. These people helped. They made the hurt less. He still watched them carefully, still positioned himself between them and Billy, but he tolerated their presence. Pippa had become Billy's closest friend besides Brutus. She visited almost daily, and they developed their own language of gestures and jokes that transcended the barrier. She was there the day Brutus collapsed during one of his patrols. Billy ran to the honey badger and carefully lifted him, carrying him to the sleeping area. Brutus wheezed softly, his breathing labored. The medical team arrived quickly, and for the first time, Billy allowed them to work without Brutus's approval. The honey badger was too weak to protest. His heart is failing, the veterinarian explained gently. We can provide medication to make him comfortable, but at his age, recovery is unlikely. Billy held Brutus through the night, talking to him constantly. You did so good, he whispered. You protected me from everything. You were the bravest. You were the best. Brutus lingered for 3 more days. He seemed to be waiting for something, holding on through sheer stubbornness. On the 3rd evening, Billy understood what Brutus needed to hear. It's okay, Billy said softly, stroking the gray fur. I'm safe now. You don't have to protect me anymore. You can rest. Brutus looked at him with those dark, intelligent eyes one last time. Then he closed them and went still. Billy held him and cried, feeling like part of his soul had torn away. The station mourned. Everyone had known Brutus, known his legend, known what he represented. Velen authorized a memorial, something unprecedented for an animal. They created a statue in the station's main concourse. Brutus in his prime, alert and protective, with an inscription underneath. Brutus, guardian, protector, family. He taught us that love knows no species boundaries and that true strength comes in the smallest, fiercest packages. Below that, a second inscription. The rule was never about fear. It was about respect. Billy spent weeks grieving. Dr. Nisara stayed close, and Pippa visited constantly. Other friends who'd earned their way into Billy's life provided support. Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. Years passed. Billy grew into a teenager, then a young man. He chose to remain in council space, pursuing xenobiology as Brutus's legacy. He specialized in interspecies bonding, studying how different species form attachments. His work became famous throughout the galaxy, cited in papers and taught in universities that on his 16th birthday, Billy stood before Brutus's statue with Dr. Nisara beside him. They'd become like family over the years, the closest thing Billy had to a parent. Do you ever regret staying? Nisara asked. Billy shook his head. This is where I belong. Brutus showed me that family isn't about species or biology. It's about who protects you when you're vulnerable, who stands beside you against everything, who loves you enough to fight the galaxy itself. He touched the statue's base gently. He was small and fierce and stubborn and perfect. And he taught the entire council that sometimes the best way to understand someone is to respect their boundaries, earn their trust, and never underestimate the power of devotion. The rule remained part of station law, though it had evolved. It was no longer never confront the boy or the monster honey badger. It had become something deeper, a principle about respecting bonds, earning trust, and understanding that family takes infinite forms. That Billy's story spread across the galaxy, told and retold until it became legend. The boy who survived a death world. The honey badger who protected him at any cost. The council that learned to honor what they didn't initially understand. And in the main concourse, the statue stood as permanent reminder, not of a monster or a threat, but of a small creature who'd loved a boy so completely that he'd changed an entire civilization's understanding of what really mattered. Years later, when students asked about the inscription, Billy would smile and explain. The rule taught us something important. When you meet something fierce protecting something precious, you don't break them apart. You don't try to conquer or contain. You step back. You show patience. You earn trust. And maybe, if you're very lucky, you become part of something beautiful. He'd look at Brutus's statue then, remembering dark eyes and gray fur and unconditional devotion. He wasn't a monster. He was the best of us. And everything I am, everything I've accomplished, exists because one honey badger decided I was worth protecting. The rule stood forever, not as a warning, but as wisdom, a reminder that love sometimes comes in unexpected forms, that strength sometimes wears a small, fierce face, and that the bonds we choose are often stronger than the bonds we're born with. Never confront the boy or the monster honey badger who protected him, because that confrontation would have destroyed something rare and precious, something the galaxy needed to witness. Proof that across all the vast differences between species, between worlds, between ways of thinking and being, one thing remained universal and pure: the absolute devotion of one soul protecting another, whatever form that soul might take.